My friend Matt was always the quiet type. You know, the kind, soft-spoken, kind-hearted, never the one to seek attention. He had this peaceful energy about him that made everyone feel safe. He wasn't flashy, never showed off, and always chose kindness, even when people didn't deserve it. That's exactly why what happened to him hit me so hard. He didn't deserve any of it. It started in our junior year of college. Matt and I were studying computer engineering together, and we often partnered for projects. One day, our professor announced a major group project that would count for almost 40% of our grade. We had to form teams of 4, and naturally, I teamed up with Matt. Soon, we were joined by 2 others, Jake and Alina now. Jake was one of those guys who looked confident on the outside, but constantly rode on others' work. Alina, on the other hand, was extremely smart, but didn't trust anyone. She preferred doing things alone, which often made collaboration a nightmare. We divided tasks, Matt, and I handled most of the coding and documentation, while Jake and Alina took care of design and presentation. Everything seemed fine at first, until Jake started ghosting us during meetings. Alina would do her part, but barely communicated. Matt tried to keep the group balanced. He even covered for Jake multiple times. "He's probably overwhelmed," he would say, making excuses for him. That was just Matt, always thinking the best of people. A few weeks in, Matt stayed up 3 nights in a row trying to fix Jake's broken code. He didn't complain, he didn't blame. He just wanted the project to be good for everyone's sake. The submission deadline arrived, and we finally turned in our work. The professor praised our effort, especially highlighting the back-end system which Matt had entirely rebuilt from scratch. But here's where things turned ugly. A day later, we were called in individually for an evaluation interview. It was a routine part of the project where the professor assessed each student's contribution. Jake, being the manipulative jerk he was, used this as his opportunity to shine. He claimed he had done all the core programming work and that Matt had just helped out. Alina, annoyed with Matt for always trying to unite the team, passively agreed with Jake to avoid confrontation. When Matt went in, he simply stated the truth. He didn't throw anyone under the bus. He listed what he did and credited others fairly. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The professor, misled by Jake and Elena's false narratives, decided to lower Matt's grade, giving Jake the highest dot. Matt was crushed, but he didn't show it. He smiled and said, "Grades don't define us," but I knew it hurt him deeply. He had worked the hardest, given the most, and yet was punished for being humble and honest. I was furious. That's when I decided if no one else would stand up for Matt, I would, and I would do it in a way Jake would never see coming. A quiet revenge, one that would leave a lasting scar not physically, but mentally. I wasn't going to yell, or fight, or report. No, that would be too easy for Jake to ignore. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he did every time he looked at his future joke. Jake had one big dream, getting an internship at a top tech company that recruited from our college. He had been preparing his portfolio for months, constantly, talking about it, obsessively refining his code, most of which was just reused from our group project. That gave me an idea. I began collecting all the versions of our project we had worked on. Every Git commit, every changelog, every time-stamped edit that proved Matt and I did the work, especially the parts Jake claimed credit for. Quietly, I compiled a detailed document, side-by-side comparisons, email records, code history, and chat logs. It was meticulous and irrefutable. I didn't send it to the professor. That would be too soon. No, I waited. The internship interview rounds came around. Jake was shortlisted. He even flaunted it around campus, acting like he already had the job in the bag. I stayed silent. Matt, still unaware of what I was planning, just smiled and said, "I hope he gets it. It's his dream." That's how good Matt was. Even after being betrayed, he still wished Jake well. But I didn't. I waited until Jake's final interview. Just a day before, I emailed the company's HR with the subject regarding a candidate's portfolio integrity, confidential evidence enclosed. I attached everything. I didn't name myself or Matt. The evidence spoke for itself. Jake never got the internship. He never even got a call back. A few days later, he confronted me angry, confused. "Did you do this?" he barked. I just shrugged and replied, "I thought you said you wrote that code. Why would it matter?" He looked at me, eyes burning, but he knew. Deep down, he knew the truth had caught up with him. Matt never found out what I did not until much later. And when he did, he didn't scold me. He just looked at me, sighed, and said, "Thank you." Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It doesn't have to be cruel or violent. Sometimes it's just the truth served cold with perfect timing. By the time the next day arrived, something in the air had shifted. I could feel it. It wasn't just the awkward silence between me and my friend. It was something deeper, like a storm waiting to break. I avoided Maya all morning, unsure of how to confront the truth without exploding. I wasn't ready to say what I knew, and I wasn't sure how she'd react. She had always been fiercely loyal, but what if this time she was loyal to someone else? That afternoon, as we walked into the lecture hall, I noticed something strange. People were staring not in the usual, casual way students sometimes do, but with that unmistakable blend of curiosity and judgment. I tried to ignore it. Maya, however, looked nervous, glancing around as if she already knew something I didn't, single quotes, and then it happened. As I pulled out my phone, I saw it. A Reddit post, anonymous, but written in just enough detail to make it unmistakable. The story talked about a girl who had backstabbed her closest friend over a boy. There were no names, but the situation mirrored ours too closely. My stomach dropped. I turned to Maya. "Did you write this?" Her eyes widened in shock, or maybe it was hard to tell. "No, I swear I didn't. Why would I do that?" But I wasn't convinced. The post had details only someone close to me would know someone like her. The next few days were hell. Every corner I turned, whispers followed. My grades started slipping because I couldn't concentrate. Every time I sat in the cafeteria, people looked away. It wasn't just about the post anymore. It was about the betrayal, the humiliation. My mental health took a hit, and even the professors noticed something was wrong. I stopped replying to texts. I stopped going out. I even stopped talking to my mum, which was the clearest sign that I was breaking. The isolation grew heavier every day. And Maya, she carried on like nothing had happened, laughing in the common room, talking to the same boy she had once sworn she didn't care about. Her ability to move on while I suffered was what hurt the most. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. I was being wiped out of my own narrative. Then came the final blow. Our university held an annual academic conference, and students were encouraged to submit their research papers. I had worked on mine for months. It was deeply personal, exploring emotional intelligence, and betrayal in close relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me. A week before the submissions closed, I found out that Maya had submitted a paper that sounded suspiciously like mine. I got a sick feeling and asked one of the committee members, who happened to be my psychology professor, about the title of Maya's entry. And there it was, my topic. My idea, slightly reworded, but essentially the same. My hands trembled as I walked out of the department building. It wasn't just about a boy anymore. It wasn't even about a Reddit post. It was about identity theft. My work, my voice, my experience stolen. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my room, going through all the messages, pictures, notes, everything that could prove that the idea had been mine. I organized everything, created a detailed timeline, and walked into the dean's office the next morning. As I sat across from him, I handed over the documents. "I'm not trying to ruin her," I said quietly, "but this isn't just plagiarism. This is personal." He listened, really listened. And by the end of the meeting, I was told the case would be reviewed by an ethics committee. The days that followed were filled with tension. Maya must have sensed something was coming because she started acting distant. She no longer smiled so widely, and the boy she had clung to now barely gave her the time of day. When the committee finally delivered their verdict, I was called in first. "We've reviewed your evidence," the chairperson said, "and we agree. Your intellectual property was clearly used without consent. The other student's submission has been disqualified, and disciplinary action will be taken." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling ... tired. As I walked out of the room, I passed Maya in the hallway. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I could see it, the regret, the fear, the realization that actions have consequences. She opened her mouth to say something, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but I didn't stop. I kept walking, because sometimes silence is the loudest revenge of all. After the unexpected confrontation, things started to unravel quickly. The once tightly controlled secret that Ethan had protected for so long was beginning to slip through his fingers. Sarah's suspicions had grown into certainty, and she began piecing together the puzzle with alarming accuracy. Every moment of hesitation, every evasive answer, every slip of the tongue, she recalled it all now with perfect clarity. The truth had always been there, hidden in plain sight. It was a stormy evening when she finally confronted him with evidence. Not just hearsay or emotion, but solid proof, phone records, photos, receipts that didn't match his stories. Ethan sat silently across the room, shoulders hunched, face pale as the wind howled outside. The silence between them was heavier than any scream. Sarah's hands trembled, not with fear, but with betrayal. She didn't want to fight, she wanted answers. "I just want to know why," she asked in a tone that cracked with pain. Ethan opened his mouth to speak but closed it again. What could he say? That he never meant to hurt her? That it just happened? Those words were as empty as the promises he had made. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't plan it. It was a mistake, a series of mistakes." But Sarah shook her head. "Mistakes don't happen again and again. Choices do. You chose this." Every single time, Ethan didn't fight back. He didn't lie anymore. There was no point. He had already lost the one thing that mattered, her trust. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. And then Sarah left. In the days that followed, Ethan lived in a daze. The home they once shared now felt like a haunted space, filled with memories that hurt more than any wound. He saw her ghost in every corner, heard her laughter in the silence. But what stung the most was not the emptiness, was knowing that he had created it. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Sarah didn't fall apart as he had assumed. She found strength in her pain. She reconnected with friends she had distanced herself from. She started therapy. She even began volunteering at a local shelter, finding comfort in helping others while healing herself. Slowly, her wounds turned into wisdom. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to move on, but the guilt followed him everywhere. He avoided old friends, deleted social media, and buried himself in work. But redemption wasn't as simple as silence or distance. It required more. Then came the twist no one saw coming. A few months later, Ethan received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a USB drive. When he plugged it into his computer, his heart sank. It contained video, clips, hidden camera footage. One clip after another, showing private moments, stolen conversations. Someone had been watching. Not just Ethan, but Sarah too. Someone had been orchestrating everything from the shadows. Ethan felt sick. Who had sent this? Why? Then he remembered. A name, Ben. Ben had been his best friend. The one who had introduced him to the woman he cheated with. The one who always laughed at secrets and offered advice that encouraged recklessness. But Ben had a darker side, one Ethan never fully saw. Now, Ethan met Ben that very night, demanding an explanation. They met in a parking lot under the glare of a flickering light. Ben didn't deny it. He smirked. "Come on, man. You think I didn't see how weak you were? I just helped speed things along. You made it too easy." Ethan's fists clenched. He had been manipulated all along. Ben had been feeding him temptation, watching him fall, documenting every step. Why? Ethan's voice trembled with rage. Ben's eyes glinted. "Because you had everything. The life, the girl, the dreams, and I had nothing. I wanted to see if you'd throw it away, and you did." The confrontation turned violent. Years of friendship shattered in one night. But what hurt more was the realization hadn't just betrayed Sarah. He had betrayed himself. He let someone else's bitterness guide his choices. He let himself be broken from the inside out. After that night, Ethan disappeared from everyone's radar. He moved cities, cut ties, and started rebuilding not just his life, but his sense of self. He began journaling, taking therapy seriously, and dedicating his time to teaching troubled teens. He used his story as a warning, never shying away from the truth. Sarah too had moved on. She found peace in her solitude. She even began speaking publicly about emotional resilience and trust. Her story inspired many, especially those two, afraid to leave toxic relationships. One day, years later, fate brought them face to face again at a charity event. The moment was surreal. The crowd buzzed around them, unaware of the silent history shared between two people now standing inches apart. Sarah looked at him, older but stronger. Ethan smiled not with arrogance, but humility. "I never expected this," he said softly. "Neither did I," she replied. "But we survived." They talked for a while, no apologies, no blame. Just two people who would walk through fire and come out different. Not enemies, not lovers, just survivors. And that was enough. The aftermath of everything that happened weighed heavily on me. After I had gathered the strength to walk away from the toxic environment and the betrayal I had endured, there was still one lingering thought: closure. I didn't want revenge for the sake of revenge, wanted peace. I wanted clarity. I wanted to rebuild my life, not around the wounds I had suffered, but around the strength I had found in surviving them. I had stopped responding to any messages from those people, the fake apologies, the subtle guilt trips, even the half-hearted attempts to reach out through mutual friends. I ignored them all. I had learned something crucial. Sometimes silence is more powerful than any words. And in that silence, I found myself healing faster than I ever thought possible. But karma, as they say, always finds its way. Months later, I heard that Sarah, the girl who had spearheaded so much of the damage, had gotten caught in a cheating scandal at her university. Apparently, she had paid someone to write her dissertation, and it all came to light during a routine check. Her degree was suspended pending further review. I didn't smile at her downfall, but I did feel a strange sense of balance returning to the universe. Meanwhile, my ex-best friend, the one who had betrayed me the most, had been struggling socially and academically. People who once followed her blindly had slowly started distancing themselves, especially when they realized the manipulative patterns I had once tried to warn them about. It's funny how truth has a way of revealing itself, even if it takes time. But the biggest surprise came from someone I least expected. One day, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a long, heartfelt apology from one of the people who had remained silent during everything. She admitted that she knew what was happening was wrong, but hadn't had the courage to speak up at the time. She confessed that seeing everything unravel made her realize how cruel silence can be. She was ashamed and asked for nothing but forgiveness. Message meant more to me than she could have known. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me that people do change. Not all of them, and not always in time, but some do. And that, somehow, made the pain feel a little less senseless. By this time, I had started to rebuild. I focused on my studies, applied for internships, and joined a community group where I met genuinely kind and supportive people. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't worried about who was talking about me behind my back. I was simply living, and it was beautiful. There were still moments when the past haunted me. A familiar scent, a song, a random memory triggered by a location. But they no longer paralyzed me. They were just that, memories, echoes of a life I had grown from. One day, while attending a student leadership conference, I was invited to share my story, not the gossip, not the drama, but the truth. I stood before a group of peers and spoke honestly about betrayal, resilience, and rediscovering self-worth. When I finished, the applause wasn't just polite, it was real. People came up to me and said things like, "That felt like my story too," or "Thank you for saying what I couldn't put into words." That night, I cried not from sadness, but from relief. I had turned something painful into something powerful. I had used my scars not to pity myself, but to connect with others who had felt just as lost. Looking back now, I don't regret what happened. That might sound strange, even unbelievable, but it's true. Because if I hadn't gone through the betrayal, I wouldn't have discovered the strength within me. I wouldn't have learned to draw healthy boundaries, to stand up for myself, to let go of people who didn't deserve me. I wouldn't have met the amazing people who now stand beside me. Most importantly, I wouldn't have found my voice. Today, I use that voice to remind others that they are not alone, that it's okay to walk away from people who bring pain, that healing isn't linear, but it is possible, that being kind to yourself is the first step to finding happiness again. And if you're listening to this, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, let me tell you this: you will. It takes time. It takes tears. But eventually, you'll wake up one day, take a deep breath, and realize that the storm has passed and you're still standing. That's the power of truth. That's the power of resilience. And that is the ending I never saw coming, but the one I'm truly grateful for.